All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everybody, and welcome to the FIDO Alliance webinar on FIDO Alliance and Qualcomm Snapdragon Sense ID. My name is Debbie Mack with the FIDO Alliance, and just before we get started, I just wanted to point out a few issues with our webinar. For one, the webinar is being recorded, and this will be available on our website at a later date this week. And two, all the attendees are in mute mode. If you do have a question, we ask that you use the question section of the GoToWebinar, and we will answer those questions at the end. I would like to introduce our two panelists for this call. Brett McDowell is the Executive Director of the FIDO Alliance, and Asaf Ashkenazi is the Director of Product Management for Qualcomm Technologies Incorporated. And with that, Brett, please start us.
Thank you, Debbie. So welcome to this webinar. This is something that we're doing at the FIDO Alliance on roughly a monthly basis going forward. So there's always an opportunity for you to find out more about what's current with the FIDO Alliance and to invite your colleagues, partners, and so forth to the next webinar. And that's also why we're archiving these, so you can go back and point people to these recordings in the future. With that, I'm going to start by giving you an overview of the FIDO Alliance and the FIDO technologies. So basically, this is all motivated by the situation with data breaches. Obviously, it's not just a 2014 problem. Data breaches have been splashed all over the headlines for the last few years, pretty consistently getting worse year over year, to the point where one industry report provided us with these statistics about how bad it was last year. 708 data breaches, 82 million records stolen, on average $3.5 million per data breach. In essence, we have a password problem, or a credentialing problem to be more precise. We need a new credentialing technology because it is the inherent properties of passwords that expose the credentials to so many vulnerabilities. Not only are passwords difficult to use, they're difficult to remember, difficult to type on small screens, they're vulnerable to data breaches and replay attacks, where you can pick off this symmetric shared secret. As long as I have the password, I can reuse it in some other site. So every time that we make passwords harder to brute force by adding entropy to them, then they become harder for humans to remember, and most people, as we know from numerous studies, reuse the same passwords in lots of websites, thus making it more vulnerable, making any one service more vulnerable. They're easily phished through spoofed email and spoofed website attacks, and keylogging malware continues to be popular and useful for harvesting account credentials. So what have we done as an industry prior to FIDO is essentially adding more authentication to the process. But adding more authentication has largely been rejected by users. In every instance in the consumer space, the extra multi-factor authentication has been first introduced as an option, not mandated by that online service. There are some exceptions in the regulated space, but for the most part, this has been introduced as an optional feature that you can add to improve your own security as a user. But the penetration rates have been, at least anecdotally reported, as very low. Former Chief Information Security Officer at a major financial services company reported that between 1% and 3% was all they were able to get, and even just getting 3% of people to opt in required some marketing and outreach. So users generally don't like all these extra steps. The most popular extra step that we tend to introduce as an industry, this is common across everybody, are the one-time passcodes. It does improve security. It does make it harder and more expensive to attack the online service if you are an assailant, but it has issues as well. If you're using SMS for that channel, you've got connectivity problems, you're waiting also, so you got delay in the user experience, the increasingly demanding user experience for fast solutions. If you are reverting to hardware and you're taking it to the next level to avoid some of the vulnerabilities associated with SMS, now you're talking about giving out security tokens and you end up with the token necklace problem that we talk about quite a bit in our industry. No matter how you look at it, it's a poor user experience in terms of extra steps, multiple screens, things to fumble around, especially in the mobile space. And ultimately, it's still vulnerable to phishing attacks, albeit more expensive instrument. So we need a new model, and that's why we came up with the Fast Identity Online Initiative, or FIDO for short. The original paradigm for online security looks a little bit like this, where you've got security on one end of the spectrum, usability on the other. And you could argue that my layout of solutions isn't exactly precise here, but in general you can see that low entropy, fewer things to type in, that is further on the usability spectrum. The more entropy you put into it, the more characters I have to type in, especially needing to type characters from multiple sources. The more secure it is, but the harder it is to use. So that was the basic approach. If you wanted more security, you had to accept the trade-off of poorer usability. The FIDO paradigm rejects that notion, and we're looking at taking both usability and security to new heights. So here I've just made that visual by showing that there's the magic quadrant here with both better security and better usability. So let me go into a little bit about how that works. What does that look like? Before I launch into the details of FIDO and how it works, it's worth pausing for a moment to look at the scope of the FIDO Alliance and the FIDO solution. We're only working on the very thin layer in the overall identity management paradigm. We're only attacking authentication. So all of the federation standards, all the single sign-on standards, all the identity management best practices, identity proofing, binding identity attributes to credentials, that all continues to operate as it has before FIDO. FIDO just slots into that little black box that most of those frameworks have, which says authentication happens here. And it's largely not been standardized. FIDO is standardizing the authentication mechanisms so that we can move from passwords to modern authentication, which is both strong and with all the risk-based solutions that continue to run in the back end. So the very basic model behind how FIDO works is that the user verifies themselves to an authenticator on their device. That authenticator, or their device, then authenticates them to the online service. So here is what it looks like in a very basic way for the two experiences that we have standardized so far. We have the UAF standards illustrated at the top of this slide, where you're presented with a challenge, then you need to authenticate. You then, as a user, present yourself to an authenticator. You could do this with a gesture, like a PIN code. You could even do it with a local password. But what you're seeing people get kind of excited about are the biometrics use cases, like touching a sensor or looking at a camera. And that's all you have to do, because you have successfully now allowed the authenticator to do user verification, and then the authenticator very quickly uses the FIDO protocols to authenticate you online. The second experience is just as simple, 1, 2, 3. This is the FIDO U2F standards, or Universal Second Factor standards. This is something you can introduce right away into your identity management paradigm to add security, more usable security, and better security than second factor solutions you might already have. So this just bolts onto your existing username and password model. So the user is presented with a challenge to type in username and password. Then there is a FIDO authenticator, such as a dongle in a USB slot, or very soon we will be introducing mechanisms that work over NFC or Bluetooth. So you're giving presence to that you do have that authenticator, and then that by giving presence to the authenticator, that allows the authenticator to authenticate you cryptographically over the internet to the online service. In this model, the username and password is essentially just identifying your account and kicking off the security challenge. The security dependency moves away from the password and into the U2F device. This allows you to offer simpler passwords, and even getting away from that model that they have to be very strong and unique everywhere, because the security token is taking on the burden of security, so even pins would work. This is a little deeper view, shows a little bit more of what's happening under the hood. There are basically two things that you want to look at and to understand how FIDO works. There's FIDO registration, followed by FIDO authentication or login or authorization to transactions. So here we're going to talk about registration. How do I go from 0 to having this FIDO authenticator registered with my online service? So the first step is that you're being bootstrapped. You're either creating a new account from scratch at a service, therefore being able to set up your FIDO authenticator as your first credential, or you're bootstrapping off of existing credentials to make the binding or linking your FIDO authenticator to the online service. So that's step one. Step two, now the online service has authenticated you using previous credentials. They invite you to do registration of your FIDO authenticator, because the FIDO authenticator is known to the flow, either because you have a U2F token or UAF has the discovery. You say, yes, I want to register. So you then present yourself to the authenticator. Again, that could be a local PIN for something, or it could be a biometric. And now the user verification with that authenticator has been successful. That allows the FIDO client to register a new key pair specific to this account with this service. So you've got a private key and a public key that was just registered here in step 3. The private key is stored and protected on the device. The public key in step 4 goes up to the online service, and that becomes the new way they're going to authenticate you in the future. So let's look at what happens there. So now you've already registered your FIDO authenticator. You've returned to this service to perform some transaction. So you're challenged to authenticate, step 1. You are then prompted by your authenticator for user verification. In this case, let's say you're presenting a fingerprint to a fingerprint sensor. Because the user verification is successful, the FIDO client on the device that's responsible for orchestrating and managing what keys get used to sign what challenges selects the correct private key. You've released the use of that private key to sign the challenge from the online service provider. It's signed at step 3 and sent back to the online service in step 4, where that challenge is cryptographically verified using the public key that was registered when you set up the authenticator in the first place. So the bottom line with FIDO is that the online authentication happens using public key cryptography. We're not reinventing that. We're just building interoperability and best practice around how that's done. And the local authentication is not standardized. It is really up to the innovators in that marketplace and all the great new things that they're coming out with seemingly every day in the biometric space as well as the secure key token space. Some of the building blocks that allow this to happen in terms of getting your FIDO vocabulary straight. On the device side, you have a web browser or a mobile app that's working with client-side implementation of FIDO protocol. And there's this interoperability layer called the ASM, especially for the UAF specifications here, that allows the authenticators to then talk to the FIDO client. One of the assumptions in the FIDO model is that you may have several authenticators on one device. So maybe you do have a fingerprint sensor on a device. You may also have a USB U2F token. You may also have a iris scan or facial recognition authenticator capability. You may also have some kind of gesture or PIN authenticator. So the orchestration has been planned for and delegated to the FIDO client. And each authenticator need only implement the ASM interface. On the relying party, what FIDO calls relying party, which if you're familiar with federated identity, we're actually talking about the identity provider here. So we're talking about the online service that manages the credentials. That's really what we're talking about. So the online service that manages the credentials is running some sort of web server, and the FIDO component just kind of bakes into that infrastructure, and you have your FIDO key store with all those public keys and registrations, and you have this other thing called the metadata and device attestation trust store. So the metadata service, which drives a lot of the trust in this model, is a way for authenticators to advertise to the online service provider what their capabilities are, such as I'm a fingerprint sensor, I'm made by so-and-so. They could even include things like my false accept and false reject rates. They can include a lot of things in metadata about themselves to help the online service provider make the decision of whether the capabilities of that authenticator meet my policy, because we enable the online service to set their own policy. Being a FIDO-enabled online service does not mean you must accept and interoperate with every FIDO authenticator in the universe. It just means you can use any FIDO authenticator in the universe. You can still set your own security policy. Here's a little better look at how the attestation and metadata model works. So the FIDO authenticator signs the attestation object, and that flows up to the server. The metadata service has already, out of band, provided the FIDO server with sort of a current snapshot of all the known good metadata. This is something that the FIDO Alliance is providing as a service to the ecosystem and working with authenticator vendors who go through our testing program. And that gives the online service the ability to, in real time, make those policy enforcement decisions. Now let's take another look at the protocol flows to see if there's anything else that we want to highlight here. So this looks exactly like it did when I gave you the very basic overview. User verification to an authenticator, followed by the authenticator doing the online authentication. Here let's take a look at U2F specifically. What's happening with user verification in a U2F scenario is that the authenticator is confirming user presence. This isn't biometric, and this isn't local user authentication. That's why you provide the username and password so the online service knows which account to challenge. Then the authenticator, using what's happening between the authenticator and the online service, is making sure this is the same authenticator I registered or trusted in the first place. So what does it look like now? Let's look at some user screens of what these technologies, kind of user experience we can get. You remember the first word in FIDO is fast. So there is a huge emphasis in the FIDO Alliance around usability. The security is an added feature that deployers will get sort of for free, but I think the exciting thing that everyone is attracted to are the new usability experiences you could offer. So here with U2F, we're looking at improved second factor authentication. So here you've challenged for your first factor. You put in your username and your password, and you have a U2F device present. In this case, a USB token in a laptop. Then you are prompted by the online service once they have confirmed the account. The security challenge comes by asking you to just touch or other gestures, other authenticators, you have to pull it out and put it back in, but you do something to register presence, that there's a real human there. And that releases the authenticator to sign the challenge, which gets you into your account. In this case, Gmail, which is FIDO U2F enabled. Looking at the same flow from the UAF perspective, or Universal Authentication Framework, you've got the same model where between the user and the authenticator, there's user verification. This time, it's not just presence, it's also biometric verification or PIN code verification. The device is challenging the user for some sort of either secret or biometric. Then the authenticator is using FIDO cryptography to log you in to the online service provider. Again, is it the same authenticator I registered before? Because I'm going to trust the authenticator to do the user verification piece for me. Now, what does that look like to a user? So here's another real-world deployment. Here is someone with a mobile phone who's shopping, and they're about to check out, and they're going to pay with PayPal. So they select Pay with PayPal. Now PayPal has to challenge the user, make sure that they have a valid account and can pay for this. So here, what's happening is the authenticator is challenging the user. This is a local challenge for the biometric. This is not a remote challenge. The remote challenge just is asking the authenticator to do user verification. You present your finger, you authenticate, locally releasing the private key to sign the challenge, and the only thing that goes back to PayPal is the sign the challenge, not any biometric information. And your payment's complete. So these things are very slick, very fast. It's like touch, look. That's basically the extent of the usability friction as the program management community likes to refer to this. The friction is down to almost nothing. So we've talked about usability and security of the FIDO model. Now I want to say a few things about privacy. Privacy by design was a critical objective of the FIDO model from its founding. So some ways to summarize the features of the privacy model. There's no third party in the protocol. So this is a point-to-point protocol between the device and the online service. There are no secrets on the server. This is both a privacy benefit, but it's also a security benefit. That means that the user and other services are no longer increasing their vulnerability to replay attacks because there aren't any secrets to harvest and then use against the user and against other services in future attacks. So the whole password data breach problem goes away. If biometric data is used in the authentication process, it never leaves the device. And the private keys are registered, never leave the device. And there is no linkability between services or accounts. This is very important. We could have very easily designed the FIDO protocol to create a unique authenticator identifier for every user and every account. But that would then be able to be used as a correlation handle to track user behavior throughout the online community space. So we went out of our way to make sure we designed a protocol where we were not leaving any artifacts lying around that could be used for user tracking. So in summary, the benefits of FIDO for online services is essentially better security and also much better usability. For enterprise deployers, they get to reduce costs because they can invest in their infrastructure one time, and because it's all standardized, then they can swap solutions in and out at a plug-and-play style. They don't have to do a major integration with every new authentication innovation that comes to the market. And that has been one of the historic barriers for some of this great user verification technology in the past, like biometrics. You really had to bet the farm on one company's solution and make that big integration into your ecosystem, into your infrastructure. But now you don't have to. You can make that one investment in your infrastructure to FIDO enable it, and now you can work with whatever the market brings to you as new innovation, always being able to decide what you trust by setting your own policy. And for consumers, this is just simple and it's safe. So lastly, I want to touch on the FIDO Alliance and some of the news around FIDO and FIDO Alliance over the past few months. So the FIDO Alliance is the organization behind this technology. It is a trade association of more than 180 companies from all sorts of different markets. This is a picture of our board member companies. There are 20 companies here, and they represent supply side for innovation and authentication, distribution with both software platforms, operating systems, as well as handsets, and relying parties to drive the strategic requirements to make sure that when we do put this stuff in the market, someone's going to use it because they drove the requirements for the solution in the first place. So you have online service providers, chip providers, device providers, biometric vendors, companies that specialize in supporting enterprise, and platform providers. And this is like the leadership team, if you will, for the FIDO Alliance overall, and another 180 companies working with them. So what have the FIDO Alliance done so far? Well, here's a picture of our timeline from the time that we formed with just 6 member companies in early 2013. Then we introduced public draft specifications. We introduced the FIDO Ready interoperability program. And late last year, we published our final 1.0 specifications. And that's critical to understand. There's a big difference between a draft specification that's still being worked out and the final specifications. There's significant differences in the way our standards process works. So it is a milestone for deployers to see the specification go from review draft and working drafts to final proposed standard. And that's where we are now. That's what makes 2015 the year for deployment. Now, we also saw some early deployments in 2014, but now we're going to see sort of more mainstream, not just the very innovative early adopters, but mainstream adopters start to deploy services that are riding on top of FIDO authentication. And as you can see, the membership has grown significantly throughout, and 1 quarter later, we're up to nearly 190 members. So a few comments about what's been happening in the news before I turn it over to one of those newsmakers, Qualcomm, to explain more about their announcement in the first quarter and what that means. Microsoft made an announcement in the first quarter that they're going to support FIDO standards in Windows 10. This is the first operating system to commit to native FIDO support right in the platform. This is going to make usability so much easier for users because the technology is going to already be on the device. They don't have to click through things and download things to make it happen. It also means a lot for relying parties and online services because now you're going to see massive distribution of client devices. So a few things to look for. Windows is currently used by about 1.5 billion users across various versions of Windows. Windows 10 itself will be available in 190 countries this summer. And what we don't know is how fast it'll be adopted, but Microsoft's doing a great job of helping us get these FIDO clients out there because they're making it a free upgrade for a year for everybody. So I'm excited to see the very rapid distribution of FIDO-capable devices through Windows 10. Also, just very recently, just last week I believe, MedImpact announced that they were going to be the first healthcare provider to deploy a FIDO authentication solution. This is going to be for a physician access portal to start with, but being a pharmacy benefits management company, they service the insurance companies who you have insurance cards in your wallet from. So through their customers, they are now on a path to bring FIDO authentication to over 50 million healthcare users. Put this in context of all the deployments that already went prior to the 1.0 standards going final, such as PayPal, Samsung, Google and Alibaba, enabled by the technology supplied from Knock Knock Labs, Synaptics, Yubico, and PlugUp. And you have a really good momentum coming into 2015 and already picking up in 2015 for deployment. And PayPal, Google, and Samsung continue to invest in the FIDO solution. It wasn't just a pilot and try it. There you can see from what they've been shipping this year that they continue to invest and reinvest in FIDO-based solutions. This leads me to the picture of all the various enablers that are out there today, because I've just talked about the live services that have deployed. Here's a picture of the ecosystem of capabilities that are now in the market that you can use to deploy your services. Enterprise software, open source implementations, mobile apps and client stacks, web browsers with Firefox adding U2F support. We're seeing it in silicon. We're seeing it really in every angle of the ecosystem, more and more companies bringing solutions to market. So I welcome you to join the FIDO Alliance, to join this trend. You do not need to be a member of the FIDO Alliance to use this technology. So you'll find out a lot more about who is in the ecosystem and what the options are by visiting our website. What I'd like to do now is turn it over to Qualcomm, who I saved the headlines that they made for themselves to talk to you about. Asaf?
Yeah, Brett, thank you very much. Thanks for excellent presentations. So this is very exciting. We are very excited about the FIDO technology and being part of this technology that we truly believe that will change the way that we authenticate ourselves. So let's move to the next slide. The first, just to give some highlights of, if you don't know Qualcomm or our position in the market. So our Snapdragon processor, this is the application processor that is running in most mobile devices, or in the leading devices. We have just for the year, we have over 825 designs in development, more than 85 manufacturers that are shipping with Snapdragon processors, and we have over 1,000 devices announced just the fiscal year 14. Next slide, please. And this shows the scalability that Qualcomm brings. We have more than 1 billion Android smartphones in the market, and we just shipped here almost 1 billion devices, and we are planning to make FIDO and going to have FIDO in all of our products, which means that all of these devices that are running the Snapdragon processor will be FIDO enabled with our solution. And as you know, more and more functionalities are moving to the mobile devices. We believe that authentication is going to be a key feature in mobile devices. And it's not just doing a secure authentication, it's also doing it in a way that is comfortable for users. Because at the end of the day, if there is something that is secure, but it's not easy for the users to utilize, then they always opt to use something that is more easy to use, even though sometimes it's not as secure. And as Brett said, FIDO provides both or the good of both worlds, right? We have the security level that is embedded or inherent in the protocol, and we have the user experience that can have or let users using it with their mobile devices. Let's go to the next slide, Fred. So just a little bit about security solutions that are coming from Qualcomm. Security is not new to us. We have our Qualcomm Secure MSM technology, which is the foundations of our security running in our chipsets. It's running in the hardware, running in billions of devices. We are doing it for many years. So security is not new for us. We have content protection solutions that are protecting 4K content that allows studios, the Hollywood studios, to feel very comfortable releasing new titles to devices that are running Snapdragon. We have our enterprise and BYOD security solutions that allows users to securely connect to the enterprise. We have the theft deterrence, you know that mobile phone theft is a big problem, and we are providing a solution that allows to remotely disable the device. And of course, the authentication. And what's nice about the authentication is that if you look at all the solutions, all of them requires authentication and good authentication, whether it is to log into the enterprise or remotely kill the device when it's stolen. All of this requires good authentication. Go to the next one. And this is why we are a proud member of the FIDO Alliance. And we are working with other FIDO members to create a world beyond passwords. And we built a solution that is an end-to-end solution that incorporates the FIDO UAS standard. And this is part of our announcement. I'll go in more details in the next slide. But basically, we have a sensor, a biometric sensor, and we are providing all the authentication components from the collection of the biometric information like fingerprint up to implementing in a secure manner the FIDO protocol, up to the server integration with the server solution that is coming from Knock Knock Lab, which we are working together in, again, creating an end-to-end solution that makes it much more easier for handset manufacturers to just take the solution. They don't need to do much. They get a solution that is working end-to-end, implemented securely, and ready to be used. Next slide. So what we announced is the Snapdragon Sense ID ultrasonic sensor. So we have a new sensor that is working in a new and innovative way. It's based on ultrasound or sound waves that are generated by a sensor and go to the finger and bounce back from the inner parts of the skin to create a 3D image of the fingerprint. And this 3D image is much, much more detailed and provides better comparison for our matching algorithm that allows us to provide more accuracy and security in identifying a real finger. And it's not just that. The solution provides convenience because it is not influenced with anything that we have on your finger. It has accuracy and consistency because of the amount of information that we can collect using ultrasonic sound wave. It provides new design opportunities for the OEMs that we'll see in the next. The security and the privacy, of course, is very important. The fingerprint biometric data never leaves the device. We store it securely in a separated execution environment that is separated from the operating system that is running on the device. All the FIDO protocol, the FIDO implementation, all the FIDO crypto and key storage is running outside of the operating system. So if the operating system, for example, is hacked on the device, all the biometric information and the authentication of FIDO is not influenced by any attack on the operating system. And it's very easy to integrate. Again, we are providing an end-to-end solution for the OEMs that works with the relying parties servers that is coming from Knock Knock Lab. Next slide, please. So one of the great advantages of using the technology of ultrasound is that any sweat, condensation, lotions, oil, moisture that people might have on their finger has no influence on the effectiveness of the sensor read. If you look at capacitive solutions that I have today, water, for example, will disrupt the read of the fingerprint. Since we are not using capacitive or electricity-based reading, we are using ultrasound. The sounds travel actually better through water and other particles that can be on the finger, and therefore it does not influence the read of the fingerprint, which provides better user experience. Next slide, please. And there is another big advantage, which is the ease of integration. So today, with current fingerprint sensors, you need to cut, or the OEMs, the handset manufacturers, need to cut a hole in order to provide direct access or contact between the sensor and the finger. Since we're using the sound waves, they can travel through glass, through plastic, through aluminum. So basically, the handset manufacturers can put the sensor below the glass, below aluminum, and put it anywhere on the device without cutting a hole. So it can be implemented in different places on the device, makes it more interesting and allows more innovative designs to provide on the handset that they manufacture. Next one, Brett. Now, one of the limitations of current solutions that since they only read the surface of the finger, it is more easier to trick them with, glue-like or other artificial ways of creating a fingerprint that or a finger that is not a real finger. Our sensor does not look at the surface. Actually, our sensor is looking much deeper because we can go deeper in the skin and see much more details in 3D to know that this is a real finger and not some, let's say, glue that looks like, let's say, wood glue that looks like a fingerprint. Next one. So if you look at the data that we are collecting, and this is really nice, we can actually see sweat pores in the skin. This is the level of detail that we can see. Actually, before I started working on this technology, I didn't know that there are sweat pores in the finger, but apparently they are. And they are helping us to collect even more information for the matching. And this provides much better security that starts with the sensor. So let's see how it works in terms of the data flow and the security, and see how the security is embedded throughout all the authentication process. And this is very important because any single part on the authentication implementation can have vulnerabilities and can reduce the security level. And it's very important to provide the security throughout all the process. There are solutions that are focusing on the sensor. There are solutions that are focused on the implementation of the, let's say, the algorithms. And just focusing on one area will not provide the entire security. You need to see it as secure from the beginning till the data is getting securely into the relying party FIDO-based server. So we start with the sensor, and as I mentioned, the sensor allows us to get much more details when capturing the fingerprint. So there is their first level of security, preventing spoofing or reducing the way to spoof a fingerprint. And then it goes into an integrated circuit that extracts this data and connects it to our secure MSM, which is in our application processor, in our Snapdragon application processor, which is very or connected in a secure channel that is not exposed to the operating system that is running. And in the secure MSM subsystem, the algorithm, their matching algorithm, decides whether it's you or not you, and then it is implementing the FIDO crypto, which is also running in the secure MSM, separated from the rest of the system, using cryptographic hardware to do the signing and to provide the message that goes securely to the relying party. So basically, you get an end-to-end solution that starts, the security starts from the sensor and goes all the way through the FIDO implementation up to the relying party that is receiving the authentication information. Next slide, please. And this provides, as Brett says, ecosystem, the ecosystem opportunities are huge. One of the things that when we look at ecosystem is the chicken and egg problem, which relying parties are saying, we will take and implement the FIDO protocol in our servers, but we need to have more devices in the market. And the OEMs in many cases saying, well, we need to see more relying parties. So as Brett said, we see already the more and more relying parties are coming, and this is big names. And the other part is, how do we make sure that there are more and more devices there that supports the FIDO protocol and has an end-to-end solution? And this is where we are coming into place, providing a solution, end-to-end solution to the OEM, makes it much easier for the OEMs, the handset manufacturers, to take it and get it to market and have more and more devices in the market that supports this solution. The fact that we are providing them an end-to-end solution also reduce the cost that they have in terms of trying to implement and have all the components implemented on their own. And by this, we hope to have more and more devices in the market that supports the FIDO protocol with our sensors, authentication sensor. And we already have handset manufacturers that are taking our solution and going to have devices this year in the market using our solution. So next slide. So just to conclude again, the most important thing that we see is, how do you do good user experience, convenience, and security? And this is where we see the FIDO protocol as providing exactly that. And with the implementation and the comfortability of using a biometric sensor, we believe that this is a solution that will help solve what we put crisis and provide better security and authentication to more people. And I think that with that, we are ready to have some questions from the audience.
Yep. So Debbie, do we have any questions?
Great. Thank you so much. We do have questions from the audience. And the first question is, what are the key differentiators between this FIDO solution and other non-KBA authentication solutions already available on the market?
So other non-KBA, excuse me, KBA here being knowledge-based authentication, so not knowledge-based authentication options in the market. So knowledge-based authentication would be things that I know about you. Biographical data, things that security experts often shudder at the thought of because of all the disclosures happening in social networks like Facebook, LinkedIn, and so forth. So I thought I talked quite a bit to one very popular, not KBA authentication solution, the one-time passcode devices. So I don't think I'll have more to say about that. But maybe we could talk about other solutions that's not OTP, not KBA or out-of-wallet questions. So I'm going to refer this over to you, Asaf, to just talk about how FIDO-enabled, let's say, biometrics might differentiate from, say, other biometric solutions, or maybe we could talk a little bit about PKI and smart card credentials. You want to take a run at it?
Yeah, so basically there are two parts to that. There is the part of the biometric solution that replaced passwords and other methods of authenticating, or a one-time passwords, or other way to authenticate the user, which makes it basically much more convenient for the user, and this is a big part of it. But then, if you look at just the biometric part, there is the big problem of how do you authenticate beyond opening your device? How do you authenticate to expand it to payments, but not only payments, actually any website that you want to sign to? How do you do that? And in order to make it successful, you can't have like different fragmented solutions that are coming from different. You need to have it is well defined that will allow the relying party to just take the server parts and then expose them to millions and hundreds of millions of users that have devices that support the same protocol that can do that. And we believe that FIDO is the most advanced and in terms of simplicity, one that can go to market and will provide this standardization layer that will allow different players in the market to implement an authentication and take the biometric part and connect it to the online service that is the relying party for authentication.
Thanks, Asaf. We have another question queued up, which you may be able to answer, which is there liveness detections within Sense ID?
So at the moment, we are not exactly talking or disclosing what we are doing that and whether there is liveness detection or not. But what I can say is that the amount of data that we are collecting from the using this sensor, because it's 3D, because we can see more details, provide us much more data that makes it very difficult to spoof a real finger.
That sounds great. Here's another question for Sense ID, which is, can Sense ID support multiple users per device?
So this is excellent and an excellent question because this is one of the big advantage of using this solution with the FIDO implementation that we have. So we can register different fingers and different users' fingers and assign them for different services authentication. So for example, usually allowed to register different fingers, but once you get into the device, any one of these users can have access to all the resources. What our solution with the Sense ID and the FIDO implementation allows to do is to register different fingers for different services. So for example, if I have multiple family members using my device, and I have, let's say, my son that can use this finger to authenticate to open the device or to access certain service, I can restrict the access to the service that authenticates me, let's say, to my bank account to only myself, to only my finger. So while different users can have access to other resources, it's only my finger that is registered to a specific service like my bank, and only I can go and authenticate and authorize purchase or let's say buying stocks or other things that I can do. So this is an excellent question because this allows another usability layer that does not exist today.
Thank you. I've got another question. At what point will developers be able to get their hands on Sense ID hardware to test their own novel and exciting biometric elements?
So at the moment, the Sense ID solution is available only to handset manufacturers. And at the moment, we are not disclosing when it will be available in our development platform, but it will be available in the development platforms that Qualcomm provides to developers.
Okay. And will the Sense ID FIDO implementation provide FIDO client interface or an ASM interface?
So it's providing ASM, and it's coming with the Knock Knock Lab parts that are running on the operating system on the Android layer. It can come with also with other solutions from other providers depending on the handset manufacturer preference. But at the moment, we are closely working with Knock Knock Lab solution.
Thank you. And how does Sense ID differ from Apple ID's Touch? How do you compete or differentiate against them?
Well, I don't want to comment on other manufacturers' solution because we are not checking or doing any comparison. What I can say is that what is the advantages of ultrasonic sensor and the Sense ID compared to sensors that are used in other devices, capacitives or other solutions that are there. And as I mentioned, the big advantages is the amount of information that we can collect, the fact that any moisture or other mediums that can be between the finger and the sensor does not have influence on the read, and the fact that it can be implemented below the glass or below any other materials that are in the phones and provide better designs options for the handset manufacturers.
Thank you. We have a few questions that touch upon Sense ID and Secure MSM. The first one is, how would a device maker run FIDO if Secure MSM is not present?
How does it? So Secure MSM is present in all of our all of the Snapdragon processors. So any FIDO solution that is implemented and provided by Qualcomm is running with the Secure MSM. We are not providing any FIDO implementation that are not using the Secure MSM. And this goes. The nice thing is that this goes from the high tier to the lower tiers that will include the FIDO solution in the future.
Okay, and then following along with that, does the Qualcomm FIDO solution support in Secure MSM support third-party user verification when not using Snapdragon Sense ID?
When not using Snapdragon Sense ID, the FIDO solution can support other authenticators. We have an authentication framework that allows to connect different solutions, so it's not limited to the Sense ID. It's also not limited to fingerprint authentication. It can be working with iris detection and other methods of biometric authentication.
Thank you. How does a relying party know that your Sense ID is more secure than other software authenticators?
Well, I'm not sure about software authenticators, but in the FIDO protocol, there is information, a supplemental information that is signed that allows the relying party to know what kind of implementation is being used. So by knowing that they are using the Secure MSM implementation from Qualcomm and the sensor from us, they know about the security level that is there.
And Debbie, I'll take a shot at this question, and then also I think we're at that point where we may have time for just one last question after this. But something to be aware of for those in attendance today around the security of FIDO authenticators. When I illustrated before that it's the authenticator on the device that's protecting the private key, it's the private key that is the critical factor to protect from attempts to intercept that through malware, let's say. And one of the things that people are doing, like with the Qualcomm design and many other manufacturers, is making sure that all the cryptographic processes, the storage and the manipulation of that private key is all happening in trusted execution environment or equivalent trusted hardware space, trusted memory, separate from the memory space that's allocated on the device for applications you might download where malware might be present. So that's one of the differentiators. If you just downloaded a FIDO client, then you run the risk that there could be attacks against the memory space in the rich OS.
Thanks, Brett. We have quite a few more questions, but I've got two more that I'd like to get answered before we close out on the webinar. And the first one is, what has been Qualcomm's role in FIDO, and how has Qualcomm contributed as an active board member?
Well, we are part of the, as I said, the FIDO, and we are members and we are a board member. And part of it is helping defining some of the protocols. We are members of different working groups. We have allocated engineering resources to help in defining parts of the future protocols that we are working on and how to provide more features. So this is one part where we're doing it, and the other one is the fact that we are promoting the FIDO solution and making actually the implementation available to handset manufacturers and educate them, providing them, make it easy for them to get it into devices. So we will have more and more FIDO-enabled devices in the market, which in our mind is the most important things for enriching the ecosystem and have for the success of the FIDO solution.
Thanks, Asaf. The last question, when will we be able to find the first phone or tablet featuring Sense ID to hit the market?
So the we expect to have devices using Sense ID in the market in the second half of this year, and we will have the FIDO, the secure FIDO implementation in devices, in many devices, expected again the second half of this year.
Thank you, Asaf. With that, we're at 11:02 with the conclusion of our webinar. I'd like to thank Brett and Asaf for presenting and fielding all the questions. We do have quite a few other questions that we didn't get a chance to address during this webinar. I'm going to send those to the panelists, and we will provide the answers to the applicable ones and send those out to the attendees shortly after the call. Thank you very much.
Thank you.